Nothing fills me with a quiet sense of very deep concern, quite like the World Economic Forum having the president of China, Xi Jinping, speaking at the recent Davos Agenda event. Let's have a listen to this propaganda in order to understand the goals of the globalist elites and how they clearly intend to use the manufactured COVID crisis as an excuse to usher in their technocratic takeover.
Professor Klaus Schwab, ladies and gentlemen, friends, the past year was marked by the sudden onslaught of the COVID-19 pandemic. Global public health faced severe threat, and the world economy was mired in deep recession.
His opening remarks kind of remind me of the wording of the Rockefeller lockstep scenario document from 2010. You know, the one that praised China's hermetic sealing off of borders during a hypothetical pandemic. China was always the blueprint for the New World Order, and I think that's why the kind of police brutality we saw during the Hong Kong riots is now present in every major Western nation where there's an anti-lockdown protest. It feels now almost as if the images that were coming out of Hong Kong at the time were a warning of what was to come for the rest of the world.
Humanity encountered multiple crises rarely seen in human history. The past year also bore witness to the enormous resolve and courage of people around the world in battling the deadly coronavirus. Guided by science, reason, and a humanitarian spirit.
Seriously? More like politically motivated pseudoscience and fear-mongering.
The world has achieved initial progress in fighting COVID-19. That said, the pandemic is far from over. The recent resurgence in COVID cases reminds us that we must carry on the fight. Yet we remain convinced that winter cannot stop the arrival of spring, and darkness can never shroud the light of dawn. There is no doubt that humanity will prevail over the virus and emerge even stronger from this disaster. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, history is moving forward, and the world will not go back to what it was in the past.
Why not? Why can't we go back to our freedoms, our lives, jobs, businesses, and rights and liberties? Oh yeah, because the Trojan horse plandemic was designed to introduce the new abnormal world and break and acclimatize the public through fear and terror into accepting draconian limitations on their freedoms. With the goalposts for how long lockdowns are supposed to last just continuously being kicked down the road further and further, the people begin to slowly forget their old lives and adapt to a life of restricted freedoms and blind obedience to authority and government mandates.
The different histories, cultures, and social systems are as old as human societies, and they are the inherent features of human civilization. There will be no human civilization without diversity, and such diversity will continue to exist for as long as we can imagine. Difference in itself is no cause for alarm. What does ring the alarm is arrogance, prejudice, and hatred. It is the attempt to impose hierarchy on human civilization, or to force one's own history, culture, and social system upon others.
Well, that's bloody rich coming from the President of the People's Republic of China. Hey, on the subject of diversity, when are you going to recognize Tibet, Hong Kong, and Taiwan as free and independent nations? You see, the standards he expects of the rest of the world apparently don't apply to China. This rhetoric about hierarchy and forcing one's own culture and history on others is basically condemnation of nationalism and national identity. The globalists wish to break down individual nation-states and turn our countries into nothing more than geographic locations, provinces of a one-world, centrally controlled superstate.
The fourth is to come together against global challenges and jointly create a better future for humanity. In the era of economic globalization, public health emergencies like COVID-19 may very well recur, and global public health governance needs to be enhanced. The Earth is our one and only home. To scale up efforts to address climate change and promote sustainable development bears on the future of humanity. No global problem can be solved by any one country alone. There must be global action, global response, and global cooperation.
Those of you familiar with Agenda 21 2030 will know that this global problems require global solutions rhetoric is the means by which the technocrats plan to seize control of every aspect of our lives and our nations. They create the worldwide problem. A crisis like climate change or a viral outbreak like COVID-19. This generates widespread panic, obviously, and finally, they are the ones who offer the solution, which nobody would have accepted if the manufactured problem hadn't first occurred. In a time of peace and relative prosperity, if you asked most people if their democratically elected governments should suddenly serve a central one-world government filled with unaccountable people they didn't elect, most people would clearly see that this idea is insane and unacceptable and a recipe for authoritarianism. But if you create a big scary global problem that threatens that peace and prosperity over a long period of time, just watch as these same people run like frightened children into the arms of the parental big government figure.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends, the problems facing the world are intricate and complex. The way out of them is through upholding multilateralism and building a community with a shared future for mankind. First, we should stay committed to openness and inclusiveness instead of closeness and exclusion. Multilateralism is about having international affairs addressed through consultation, and the future of the world decided by everyone working together. To build small circles or start a new Cold War, to reject, threaten or intimidate others, to willfully impose decoupling, supply disruption or sanctions, and to create isolation or estrangement will only push the world into division and even confrontation. We cannot tackle common challenges in a divided world, and confrontation will lead us to a dead end.
That kind of sounded to me like resistance is futile. All your nations must comply with the one unified world order or else.
Humanity has learned lessons the hard way, and that history is not long gone. We must not return to the path of the past. The right approach is to act on the vision of a community with a shared future for mankind. We should uphold the common values of humanity, namely peace, development, equity, justice, democracy, and freedom. Rise above ideological prejudice, make the mechanisms, principles, and policies of our cooperation as open and inclusive as possible, and jointly safeguard world peace and stability. We should build an open world economy, uphold the multilateral trading regime, discard discriminatory and exclusionary standards, rules, and systems, and take down barriers to trade, investment, and technological exchanges. We should strengthen the G20 as a premier forum for global economic governance, engage in closer macroeconomic policy coordination, and keep the global industrial and supply chains stable and open. We should ensure the sound operation of the global financial system, promote structural reform, and expand global aggregate demand in an effort to strive for higher quality and stronger resilience in global economic development.
That's a long-winded, nice-sounding political word salad of garbage, which basically translates to there will be one global economic system, and it's basically going to be communism for the masses, where the means of production are completely controlled by the central planners. The elites at the very top will own everything and enjoy unparalleled wealth, while the rest of us contend with being plunged into extreme poverty and neo-feudalism, where we own nothing and our food supply is greatly reduced. But at least we'll all be equally poor and starving together. Isn't equality and inclusion grand?
We need to be resolute in championing the international rule of law and steadfast in our resolve to safeguard the international system centered around the UN and the international order based on international law.
And he's just said it right there. He's just told you exactly what's going to happen. Steadfast in our resolve to safeguard the international system centered around the UN, the United Nations. In other words, the UN is going to be the one world government. By the way, just as a quick aside, on the same day as the Event 201 tabletop exercise took place in New York on October 2019, the following military display was taking place in Wuhan, China. Seen enough yet?
Multilateral institutions, which provide the platforms for putting multilateralism into action and which are the basic architecture underpinning multilateralism, should have their authority and effectiveness safeguarded.
Multilateral institutions are not elected or chosen by the people. This is an absolute affront to democracy and the will of the citizenry. Multilateral institutions could include the likes of corporations or entities like the World Economic Forum or the UN, basically parasitic institutions that bypass the free will of the people and work directly with national governments. Nobody elected the likes of the UN or the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the IMF, the World Bank, the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, etc. But these entities have obtained enormous power nonetheless. Politicians within our governments have signed us up to partnerships and agreements with such entities and permitted them to dictate how we run our societies. We the people did not give them permission to do this, and we certainly didn't give such organizations the authority to govern us. It's time we took back our power. Our governments are not fit for purpose. They are actively working against us.
State-to-state relations should be coordinated and regulated through proper institutions and rules. The strong should not bully the weak. Decisions should not be made by simply showing off strong muscles or waving a big fist. Multilateralism should not be used as pretext for acts of unilateralism. Principles should be preserved, and rules once made should be followed by all. Selective multilateralism should not be our option.
In other words, no debate, no dissent, all nations must comply with central planning and a single political philosophy.
History and reality have made it clear time and again that the misguided approach of antagonism and confrontation, be it in the form of Cold War, Hot War, Trade War or Tech War, would eventually hurt all countries' interests and undermine everyone's well-being. We should reject the outdated Cold War and zero-sum game mentality, adhere to mutual respect and accommodation, and enhance political trust through strategic communication. It is important that we stick to the cooperation concept based on mutual benefit, say no to narrow-minded, selfish, beggar-thy-neighbor policies, and stop unilateral practice of keeping advantages in development all to oneself. Equal rights to development should be guaranteed for all countries to promote common development and prosperity. We should advocate fair competition, like competing with each other for excellence in a racing field, not beating each other on a wrestling arena.
To the uninitiated, what he's saying here probably sounds reasonable and fair. Well, he's just saying that nations shouldn't be selfish or hostile to each other, and instead they should work towards mutually beneficial cooperation. But in truth, everything being said by elites must always be decoded. What he's actually saying here is that governments should not think of the interests of their own people first. Nations should not consider their own self-interest over the collective. It's the same logic that we're seeing today when it comes to the lockdowns. Lockdown zealots will call us selfish and irresponsible for making a case for our own individual human rights and freedoms. They say we should comply with the lockdown restrictions and mask mandates for the safety of the community, the greater good. It's collectivism. It's group rights over the rights of the individual. Individual rights are the only human rights there are. So, what this guy is saying here is, individual nations should fall in line with the interests of the global agenda and not their own interests. This basically means that governments should serve the technocrats and not their people, which, of course, is exactly what we've been seeing throughout this entire crisis.
Fourth, we should stay committed to keeping up with the times instead of rejecting change. The world is undergoing changes unseen in a century, and now is the time for major development and major transformation. To uphold multilateralism in the 21st century, we should promote its fine tradition, take on new perspectives, and look to the future. We need to stand by the core values and the basic principles of multilateralism. We also need to adapt to the changing international landscape and respond to global challenges as they arise. We need to reform and improve the global governance system on the basis of extensive consultation and consensus building. We need to give full play to the role of the World Health Organization in building a global community of health for all. We need to advance reform of the World Trade Organization and the international financial and monetary system in a way that boosts global economic growth and protects the development rights, interests, and opportunities of developing countries.
What's key to understand here is that the end result of their plans is that the individual citizen is made increasingly distant from the source of actual power in the world. Their elected officials are just puppets, and their nations are vassal states. You can vote for your local representative in some local elections, but you can't vote out anyone in, say, World Health Organization, IMF, World Economic Forum, or the UN. That's where all the power and control has been siphoned off to. Likewise, you can't vote out Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates. You, as a person, are now further away from the actual levers of power and influence than ever before.
We need to follow a people-centered and fact-based policy orientation in exploring and formulating rules on global digital governance. We need to deliver on the Paris Agreement on climate change and promote green development. We need to give continued priority to development, implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and make sure that all countries, especially developing ones, share in the fruits of global development. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, after decades of strenuous efforts by the Chinese people, China is on course to finish building a moderately prosperous society in all respects. We have made historic gains in ending extreme poverty and have embarked on a new journey toward fully building a modern socialist country.
A modern socialist country. There you have it. This is the nation that the EU and the United States wants to build a stronger relationship with, China. And then, of course, throw in a 5G-enabled social credit surveillance system, and you've got China, the blueprint for the prison planet dystopia that they want to build for us.
China will continue to promote sustainable development. China will fully implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It will do more on the ecological front by transforming and improving its industrial structure and energy mix at a faster pace, and promoting a green, low-carbon way of life and production.
And there's Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goal. And there's Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals being thrown in there for good measure. You know, 2030, you'll own nothing and be happy. You'll rent everything and, I don't know, eat bugs and plant-based soy burgers and live in a pod with nothing but universal basic income to fund your peasant lifestyle.
Mr. President, thank you for such an important speech.
Ah, there's Klaus Schwab. He never ceases to entertain me with how he just comes off as a cliched James Bond villain.
In a matter of hours, when America and Russia have annihilated each other, we shall see a new power dominating the world.
Which at this crucial moment in history provides us with a truly comprehensive framework for shaping the future. Mr. President, you have defined 4 clear objectives for moving forward. To strive together for strong, sustainable, balanced and inclusive growth. To find harmony in the diversity of human civilization through respectful interaction. To close the gap between developing and developed countries as a prerequisite for true global prosperity.
Of course, what they want people to believe is that when they say closing the gap between developing and developed countries, that the developing countries will be brought up to the economic level and living standards of the developed ones. But in truth, as with all utopian communist takeovers, the middle class fall into poverty. So, it's actually the developed nations that will be brought down to the economic and living standards of the developing ones. But hey, at least we'll all be equally poor, right?
And finally, to strengthen global cooperation in addressing the big common challenges, namely COVID-19 and climate change. Mr. President, you also showed us the principles which should guide us on our common path. Multilateralism based on openness and inclusiveness. Being committed to international law and international rules. Overcoming differences through consultation and cooperation. And being open for change. And for improvements and reforms of our global governance system. Particularly in exploring and formulating rules on global digital governance.
Who elected these people? Why are we allowing them to shape our future? While the vast majority of people walking around the streets of our countries are in a state of mass delusion, obsessively hand sanitizing when they walk into shops, wearing face masks and standing on circles, and being terrorized by scary graphs and case numbers in the media about a fake pandemic, they have no idea that these technocrats like Klaus Schwab are busily engineering a hellish nightmare world for their future. They have no idea that the pandemic is a ruse a distraction from the evil operating behind the scenes. They aren't aware that they're running out of time to stop this agenda. They're being kept busy worrying about a virus that's less deadly than the flu, while the digital prison of the Great Reset and the Fourth Industrial Revolution is being built around them.
Mr. President, in your speech, you also committed China to take an active part in global efforts to win the fight against COVID-19, to continue the fundamental policy of opening up, to fully implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and to act with greater openness with regards to international exchange and cooperation on science and technology. You concluded that we should enter a new era of global cooperation based on dialogue and being guided by the fact that there is only one planet, Earth, and only one common future. Thank you, Mr. President, for opening this Davos Agenda Week with such an important policy statement and for reminding us that we are all part of a community with a shared future for humanity. On behalf of all the participants, a great thank you, Mr. President.
Well, the agenda is being laid out. It becomes more obvious as the months march forward. The world's most powerful supervillains twirl their mustaches and publicize their nefarious plans, and the masses around us are absolutely clueless. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you would like to support my work, you can do so by following the subscribe star link below. It's very much appreciated. Also, you can donate via my website, computingforever.com/donate. Or if you'd like to pick up one of the How Is This a Thing mugs, they're now available from the Computing Forever store, and there's a wide variety of different character art to choose from. The character art was, of course, designed by the brilliant Brian Martinez. Thank you very much again for watching, and please subscribe for more and share this video with as many people as you think will actually watch it, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.